So this video is going to be on the 4 general types of tissue or categories of tissue, and I'm going to go ahead and go into a few of those with you guys. So let's go over the 4 major tissue types or tissue categories. So these are epithelial tissues, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. Alright, these are the 4 major tissue types or tissue categories. Now, I'll have 2 more videos where I'll go through epithelial tissues and connective tissues with you guys, because there's several of those, and so I kind of break those down into separate videos. But in this video, I'm going to be going through muscle tissue and nervous tissue with you guys, okay? So let's start with nervous tissue here, since we already got this one pulled up. So this picture right here is of nervous tissue. Now, nervous tissue makes up your nervous system, okay? So you're going to find tons and tons of this tissue in the central nervous system, so the brain and the spinal cord. And you're also going to find it in the peripheral nervous system, which is found outside of the brain and spinal cord. So those are going to be, tissues that make up your neurons or nerves outside of the brain and spinal cord. And so pretty widespread tissues again, and the major function of this tissue is to allow for communication, okay? And the way that this tissue allows for communication is through the sending of electrical signals or electrical impulses. So this tissue works very similarly to how electrical wires work, okay, and sending electricity. And we'll talk about that when we get into the nervous system chapter. Now this big cell right here is called a neuron. And neurons are the functioning cells of the nervous system. These are the ones that send electrical signals, okay, and allow for communication. All these little tiny cells that you see kind of scattered out here, those are called neuroglia. Oops. Neuroglia, or support cells. And so those are going to be providing certain types of support to the neuron to help keep it safe, keep it happy, provide nutrients to it, insulate it, and help protect it. Okay, so their job is to keep those neurons happy. All right, let's go with nervous tissue. So let's get into muscle tissues. Okay, there are 3 types of muscle tissue. And we'll start up here at the top with skeletal muscle. Now, skeletal muscle is found attached to, you guessed it, the skeleton. Okay, it's attached to your bones. And this muscle is used to pull on bones to allow for movement of areas of the body. As you might notice, these cells of skeletal muscle are pretty large. They're kind of cylindrically shaped, so I'm outlining one cell right here. Okay, there's one big cell. There's another big cell right here. So nice and long, they're cylindrically shaped. And they're what we call striated, which means they have kind of a banding pattern to them. They look striped. If you look closely, you see some dark and light bands. Those will come back up when we get to the skeletal muscle chapter and start talking about how it works, okay? These cells are multinucleate, which means they have multiple nuclei per cell. We'll get more into that later on. And their major purpose, again, is to allow for movement of the body. More specifically, they allow for voluntary movement, which all that means is we have conscious control over this muscle. I can tell my bicep muscle in my arm to contract, and I can make it do it when I want it to, okay? So this allows for voluntary movement. We have conscious control over this muscle. This next type is cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is only found in the walls of the heart. And this muscle is also striated, so if you look closely, you'll see that dark and light banding pattern, but it's not quite as bright or easy to see as it is in skeletal muscle. Another thing you might notice about cardiac muscle is the cells are not perfectly cylindrically shaped, and they don't sit perfectly one on top of the other. Instead, they kind of branch off of one another. You can see this one forking a little bit here. This one kind of forks or branches here. So these cells branch off of one another. Another thing that lets you pick out cardiac muscle specifically are these dark pink lines. Can you guys see these hot pink, kind of dark pink lines? Those lines are called intercalated discs. And those are a form of gap junction. Okay, gap junction. You guys might have remembered that from the cell chapter. Gap junctions are used to allow for communication between cells, allow for transport of nutrients between the cells. Okay, but specifically in cardiac muscle, they're really going to be used for communication. These cells need to be able to communicate with each other very rapidly because they all want to work together to allow the heart to function properly. You want all of these cells to be able to contract at the same time in order for the heart to be able to pump as it should to get blood to the body. Okay, so that's what those are used for. Now the main purpose of this muscle is to allow for contraction of the heart, okay, to pump blood throughout the body. This third type of muscle is called smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is found in the walls of your hollow organs. So pretty much all of your hollow organs, especially when you look at the gastrointestinal tract and you start talking about large blood vessels, you'll have smooth muscle lining all of those. Okay. Now these cells have a unique shape to them. If you look closely, you'll notice the cells kind of look something like this. Okay. It's what we call a spindle-shaped cell, where they're kind of fat in the middle and then they taper off on the ends. And each one of these cells has its own little nucleus. Okay, and these cells allow for a special form of contraction called peristalsis. It's kind of a wave-like contraction, and the major function or purpose of it is to allow for movement of materials through those hollow organs. So let's just use the gastrointestinal tract as an example. We're constantly wanting to move food material through the gastrointestinal tract, right? And so the way that we can do that is we have this muscle lining those hollow organs that can kind of contract and cause the organ to squeeze, almost like a tube of toothpaste, to help push that material in one direction. Okay? So you guys go back through these muscle tissue types and nervous tissue and let me know if you have any questions about them.